Good afternoon. Thank you. We are going to talk about unintended consequences, and I consider it to be a primer to critical thinking. The reason why I chose this topic is because today it is very fashionable to talk about evidence-based policymaking and to talk about empirical realities. But I think it is important to understand that to be able to get any benefit out of empirical realism, as we put it, we have to understand the data when and wherever we see it. It is important to understand that if two people see the same things, they can come to very different conclusions, right? And it depends crucially on how they have decided to look at the data. You know, you are all business school people, many of you here, so you know this very famous example that is used, right? Two people were sent to a place to find out if there was a market for shoes, and both came back, saw exactly the same things, and one said there's a huge market for shoes, and the other said there is no market for shoes, right? The observation was nobody was wearing shoes, right? Based on the theory that they had about why people don't wear shoes, they came to exactly different conclusions. So that is what I mean when I say that you have to be able to abstract and have a theory to be able to understand the data. And that is what I'm going to talk about today. So we start with a very simple problem. We are going to go through a thought experiment in the sense that there is no data. I'm not going to talk about any data. We are going to construct the data in our own way, as if. So let's take two places, A and B, and we find that people travel from A to B every day during rush hour. A is where they stay, B is where they work, right? So they commute every day. But the important thing that we are looking at is how much time it takes to go from A to B. Okay? So we run this, periodically to figure out whether people are taking more time or less time. So we do this study in 2010, and we find that there are 2,000 cars that go from A to B, and they take 45 minutes to travel from A to B. Okay, so that's the commute time. We run this again in 2015 to see if things have changed, and we find 2,000 cars are still going from A to B, but they are taking 50 minutes. So that is the data we get, and we are now trying to figure out why is it that this has happened. People have gone old, they are driving slow, 5 years, right? Good enough time to get old. So they are driving slower, all of them, and hence it's taking 50 minutes, or is there something else that is happening? So we find that when we look closer into the problem, we find that there are 4 nodal points that are of interest to us, A and B to begin with, and C and D too. Why? Because what was happening in 2010 is that there were 1,000 cars out of the 2,000 that we started with. 1,000 cars were going to B via C. Okay? And they were taking 45 minutes. And another 1,000 cars were going to B via D, and they were taking also 45 minutes. Right? So that's what we figure out when we do a little bit more detailed analysis of what was happening in 2010. Now we come to 2015, and we again do the survey. We again ask people at B that how did you come? Why did it take you 50 minutes? How did you come? And I find that 1,000 of those 2,000 are traveling ACDB. Right? So they're not going ACB, but they're going ACDB. They're not going ADB, they're going ACDB. And that's the reason why probably they're taking 50 minutes. The other 1,000 cars are doing exactly the same thing. So they're also taking 50 minutes. Right? And thereby hangs a tail. That all 2,000 cars are going from A to B. Earlier, they were breaking up into 2 groups, one going ACB, the other going ADB. Now, all 2,000 are going ACDB. And now we have to figure out why this is happening. Okay? And here is where I bring in the unintended consequence of increasing their travel time by 5 minutes, even though they're going to the same place, same number of people. So what we are going to do now is we are going to go back to 2010, right, and see what was happening. So people who were going A to B, right, via C were following this route. What is so special about this route? That the stretch of the road C to B was a highway. And what is so special about a highway? What is special about a highway is that once you enter the highway, right, you travel at the same speed regardless of how many cars there are. There is no congestion. But the stretch A to C had congestion. It's like a bridge, one-lane bridge, right? So clearly the time taken to go from A to C depends on the number of cars in that stretch A to C. And we are taking a very simple model, and we are saying that if T is the number of cars, then the amount of time taken to go from A to C is T over 100. Remember, 1,000 cars were going A, C, B. So 1,000 cars were taking 10 minutes to move from A to C, and then 35 minutes from C to B, and that was the reason why they were taking 45 minutes. Okay, 10 plus 35. What were the people who were traveling the other way, A, D, B, what were they doing? Well, they also had a 35-minute highway stretch, and they also had to cross the same bridge, right, at a different place, of course, sorry, the same river they had to cross at a different place. And there they faced exactly the same congestion problem, so they also took 10 minutes to cross it. Right? So 35 plus 10, A, D, and B. So that was the reason why they were taking 45 minutes in 2010. Now we come to 2015. So what's happening in 2015? Again, we have these 4 nodes because we know they're going A, C, D, B. So our interest is in knowing why is it that they're going C, D. Well, we find that there is a new highway that has been created between C and D. Okay, so there's a new road that has been made. And one would expect that when you build more roads, the time taken to commute should go down. At least it should not go up. But here we find that it has gone up to 50 minutes. The only thing that has changed is that there is a new road between C and D, a new highway between C and D. And this highway takes 10 minutes to cross from C to D. Okay, so it's a really modern highway, concrete roads and all of that. So now what happens? Suppose we know that all 2,000 cars are going A, C, D, B. So what is happening when they go from A to C, 2,000 cars, it's taking 20 minutes. Earlier it was taking 10 minutes. Now it's taking 20 minutes. 10 minutes to go from C to D. And again, all 2,000 cars are going D to B. Right? So that's the reason why they are taking 50 minutes, because 20 minutes plus 10 minutes plus 20 minutes is 50 minutes. So this new road has resulted in this. Now we need to be able to ask, to understand this completely unintended consequence, right? We need to be able to understand why is it that people are behaving in this way. You know, when you build when you build a dam to change the course of a river, right? You do a lot of study and you figure out exactly how fluid dynamics works, right? And then you build a dam and divert the water. Now imagine if these water particles were you and me, who figured out that this is what the engineers are trying to do, right? And we love to act contrarian to what others want us to do. So we decide not to divert ourselves. So we jump over the dam. Think about it. That's exactly what we do as people, and that's exactly what policymakers need to keep in mind, that they're not dealing with natural particles. They're dealing with what we would call strategic elements. And therefore, we need to know how they behave to be able to understand how to intervene in the marketplace. Some things that we don't do, whether in RCT or the so-called randomized controlled trial experiments, or in the experimental approach that we often follow. It's totally devoid of theory, and that should be avoided. Right? So that's the reason why I'm going through this example. So let's see what happens. I call it phase 1. So phase 1, what happens? There are 1,000 cars going A, C, B, right, before the road is built. Then the road is built. Now let's look at these 1,000 cars, right? So if all of them change to A, C, D, B, then they're going to take 10 minutes to go from A to C, 10 minutes to go from C to D, and now all 2,000 cars are going D to B. Yes? So therefore, they will take 10 plus 10 plus 20. That's 40 minutes. That is 5 minutes less than ACB. So they will shift. Now when they shift, what happens? There are these people who are still going ADB. So now we come to phase 2. So the ADB people are saying 35 plus 20, I am taking 55 minutes, all because the so-called migrants onto D and B have entered our road. And that is increasing our time, right? Not good. But when you can't beat them, you join them. So what if I were going ACDB? So consider the first person who shifts. So from A to C, there are 1,000 cars. Now it becomes 1,001. So the time taken becomes 10.01 plus 10, that is 20.01, plus 20, that's 40.01. That's a lot less than 35 plus 20, which is 55. So the first car shifts. And now suppose everybody shifts. Then they take 20, 10, 20. So individually, each one is taking an action which is good for herself. But in the aggregate, everybody is damaging everybody else's happiness, including the first person who shifted. And that's the unintended consequence that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to discuss, right, how we should intervene. This focus on get the data first, let the data tell the story is a must, is a necessity. But please remember, it is not sufficient. I will end with another example, which again you may all know. The reason why I'm giving these examples is so that you can recall them, right? And this appears in your class 12 textbooks. This is about the rat menace in Vietnam, where people tried to get rid of rats. The French, corresponding to our Governor General, the French authorities at that time, to keep Saigon free of rats, offered people that if you bring in the tail of a rat, then I'll give you an award. So what were people doing? They were farming rats. So all that happened was that instead of rats with tails, you had rats without tails running around Saigon. And actually the same thing happened in British India when they tried to control the cobra population, the snake. Okay. They offered reward for bringing in the cobra. And so people started farming cobras. So this is what you need to understand, that unless you can figure out how people are going to respond to an intervention, don't even try it.